I've been watching League of Legends for 12 years now, and World Finals 2022 is by far the greatest underdog story in League of Legends history. As you know, we love the draft around here. Let's take a look. Let's see what went right. Let's see what went wrong for DRX and T1, and then we're going to check out some game highlights, and we're going to put some historical context into it all. I think it's going to be a good time. Let's get into it. So, first game, we see the Akali's banned, right? Zeka, known as sort of like this melee player. Obviously, he's just a great player in general, but we're getting that Akali off the table quickly. It's just like a potent, strong, proactive pick in general, and pretty good into Sylas, as we found as the World Championships progressed. The more interesting ban, I would say, is the Sejuani ban. Sej is your stereotypical tank, so it opens up a lot of avenues for counter picks. So it's interesting that at literal World Finals, we're still seeing bans for it, sort of because of its flex capabilities. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's just sort of interesting to take note of. It also had a very high priority in Genji versus DRX as well. So maybe just in general, high priority for Korean teams. Everything else is pretty standard. So on red side, we have the Caitlyn Lucian ban, right? Those are very strong heroes. You don't want one person to take them, and it's hard to disrupt the duos that they're strong with. And anyone that's a fan of my content knows I think that Yuumi is a terrible champion, but people think she's very strong in World, so she's banned. I think there's also some. It's also a little interesting that through this series, T1 puts some emphasis on the Ashe ban, but I'm not going to get too into it. We know the strength. I think for the most part, we all know the strengths and weaknesses of Ashe and what T1 is trying to take off the table. Anywho, I think a lot of people were caught off guard by the high Varus priority in this series. So I just want to delve into that really quickly. No one's figured out a good way to beat Nami Lucian, and no one's figured out a good way to beat Caitlyn. So those are two ADCs off the table. Already we're dropping the priority of what strong ADCs can be picked. Also, people consider Aphelios, specifically Aphelios Lulu, a very strong team comp, right? A very strong bot lane. Aphelios is a hero that is very good when you run into him and not as good when he needs to chase you. Because of this, he's sort of limited by his range, except when I guess he has Green Gun. And Varus is a higher ranged hero, so he can apply a lot of pressure onto Aphelios, and the compositions Aphelios is good into for that reason, by being more of a siege hero. As you know, anyone familiar with my content, I like to break League down into two very binary forms. There's comps that like to dive, and there's comps that like to get dove, and of course there's infinite nuance in between that. But just for easy digestibility, right? Aphelios likes to get dove, and Varus disrupts that by sort of being longer range than him, by being this third elusive siege variable. So that's sort of why Varus is a high priority. And I think the other reason, and I want to bring this up and make this very clear, I personally feel that Gumayusi is the best Varus in the whole tournament, and one of the best Varuses I've ever watched play League of Legends. I think Varus is a hero that I really like seeing in competitive play because he's a very high skill expression, and I think it's very easy for me to identify who's playing well when Varus is in the meta. And I've been pretty blown away by the way Gumayusi plays it. And I think I kind of wanted to highlight this because I saw a lot of Reddit threads where people would talk about Gumayusi, or I would talk about what Gumayusi plays. And I saw a lot of just random Reddit threads. I would see comments about what they think Gumayusi is good at. And I noticed that not a lot of people had put a lot of respect on the Varus. But I think DRX correctly identified that the Varus is such a key part of T1's winning strategy. So I'm glad they did, and I'm glad that I think it just makes sense that he had such a high priority in this series. That's all. Even though I think it took a lot of people by surprise, I sort of anticipated that to be how the series would go. Alright, so the return picks, we already know. Aatrox extremely high win rate through this tournament, just really strong. Viego, I'm going to talk about briefly here, and we're going to talk a little bit more when we get into game highlights. I personally think Viego's a very weak hero. He's just snowbally. In card game terms, you kind of refer to that as a win more champion. Viego's just sort of this resetter. You kind of already need to be winning the fight for him to get his resets off and start going. I don't consider that particularly strong. And we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into game highlights. Don't worry, I won't have to repeat myself on a lot of these things once we're actually a little farther into the games, but for the first game, I'm just going to like talk about some of my general feelings on champions. Okay, anywho, Renata was left up this game. DRX decided not to take it. They prioritized what they prioritized. I don't think Piosik has like the most I don't think he's comfortable on too many heroes, so they try and stick to what he likes, which is the Viego and Kindred. And T1 respond with the Yone and the Renata. So Yone has been considered a very strong counter to Aatrox's tournament. The way that the matchup sort of plays out is you can use the different portions of Yone's E to dodge Aatrox's spells, which is like the main part of fighting Aatrox. Mainly you want to dodge that third Q. So for example, you can E in with Yone and snap back to dodge damage, or you can actually use the ability itself as a jump to get out of the way of damage. So if you play it very well, it can be a counter, and Zeus has shown that he's most likely the best Yone in the tournament and very good at this particular matchup. All right, so DRX put no priority on picking their bot lane, and then they go into Sylas. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what these comps mean so far. T1 has shown throughout the tournament that as opposed to team fighting, right, T1 had to beat a very difficult two very strong team fighting teams, right? They had to beat RNG and they had to beat JDG. In order to do so, T1 used a lot of strategies that relied on 1-3-1 and just hard split push. So when we see Yone, we can anticipate that they might want to create a comp where their 1-3-1 is really strong. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? DRX, on the other hand, is creating a comp, right? So we don't know where they're going to go when we see the first two heroes. Once Sylas is locked in, they're saying, okay, we are just a very dive-heavy comp with what we've shown, right? Aatrox likes to go in, Sylas likes to go in. Sylas also provides 1-3-1 capabilities, but DRX doesn't like playing that way as much as maybe T1 does. Zeke is sort of like he likes trying to like solo kill you, I guess, which is a 1-3-1 strategy, but he also likes to just like run in and try and beat you up. Whereas T1's like very traditional in the way that they try and play the 1-3-1. Okay, so if we know that a team is going for a 1-3-1, we want to sort of like disrupt that to the best of our ability, right? And a champion that's super good at 1-3-1ing and also beats Sylas in lane pretty hard is Rise, and Faker's shown that he's really the only person in the whole tournament that can play Rise on a level necessary to win World Championship games. So I just want to show you really quickly how DRX sort of sniffed out this was going to happen, and an example of T1 doing it before. So in this game of T1 versus JGG, this is game 2. They picked the Yone this game and the Rise, and then they had the core of Nami Lucian for their mid lane, right? This is like a very 1-3-1 comp that T1's able to just like play all lanes of the map. They don't have to actually team fight JDG, and they can just out macro win, and this game went super well for T1, right? That strategy went phenomenally. So that is what DRX was trying to avoid with this particular draft. I also just want to like hit on this note really quickly. Going into this series, I felt that obviously T1 is by far the favorites going into this series. I felt that like one way that T1 could sort of trip themselves up versus DRX is T1 won a lot of games with, as I said, 1-3-1s, different split push strategies, but they also fought a lot of really strong team fighting things. I think on paper, T1 actually is supposed to be able to beat DRX in team fights, like as a team fighting team. Obviously, DRX massive underdog, so that makes a lot of sense that we would think this way. I almost felt like from a draft perspective, T1 should try and simplify their comps and just sort of out mechanics. I don't want to say out mechanics. It's not really fair, but just sort of out team fight DRX and not commit so much to like more harder to execute strategies, just because I don't think it's necessary. But they're already sort of showing their hand that maybe they're not necessarily going to do that by going Yone. We'll see how that progresses. Anyway, bans are making perfect sense. Everything's making perfect sense. It's looking cool. I think DRX knows what they're doing draft-wise. T1 bans another just initiate hero because DRX is showing they're just playing like a comp that just like dives in. And then here's where things get a little weird. Heimer is very off pace with the rest of what DRX wants to do. I'm not certain why I know why they drafted it. DRX was not sure how to win lane with the ADC and support pool that they had left. So they went just like something that's like a strong bot laner, but it doesn't actually fit with their comp. Heimer does not dive in. He is not good at doing that. Once we make it past the lane phase, Heimer's going to have a very difficult time actually finding his purpose in the game. T1, doubling down on what they're doing, they decide to go Lee Sin. Lee Sin, obviously, like, jumps in, but he's kind of like flexible in how he can play. You can just use him as sort of a kick bot to like get stuff away from you, which is how you would imagine T1's going to want to play out this game based on what they've drafted. Of course, like, they're kind of flexible. Like, Varus and Renata aren't exactly bad at following up, so like there's flexibility to how they play, but you have to imagine they're going to want like more peel, more disengaged, just based on what DRX is drafted. Maybe, right? In theory. And they rounded out with Azir. Azir, very one-dimensional. Azir he likes to disengage, he likes to get dove on, he likes to just hold space, right? So T1 sort of commit to the strategy. Not so much of a 1-3-1er, right? Their 1-3-1 strategy has successfully been defended by DRX with the Rise ban. Akali is not on the board. Sylas is taken. Rise is banned. Your option is Azir, and he is not so much of a 1-3-1er. So now it's really just a solo split push Yone, or Yone has to group for team fights. Those are the options. If Yone groups for team fights, he's a little off pace with what the rest of the team wants to do, because DRX is very much going to be diving, especially when they round it out with this Sivir pick. Sivir's surprisingly high win rate in this tournament. All right. So DRX has some options. They can 1-3-1 a little bit if they want to, but mostly it's just a dive comp with Heimer literally there just to facilitate lane, because he absolutely does not help what their comp wants to do. Overall, I guess my criticisms here are that T1 was not able to fully actualize their 1-3-1 comp, because I think when you want a hard split pusher, you'd rather have a Camille or a Fiora, and Yone is better for 1-3-1 comps or just dive comps. And my criticism for DRX is that Heimer is super off-tempo with what they want to do, and they're really just picking him to survive lane phase, which could have been avoided by maybe different priority on Renata or Renata Ben, something like that. All right, so let's take a look at the game a little bit. And I think usually when I do these, I try and show how the team comp affects the plays, but I think we're just going to go through plays in general this time, because I just want to talk about the games, and it was a good time all around. So anywho, I just want to first highlight that I didn't agree with the narrative I've been seeing online on Reddit, on Twitter, about Pyosik. I think people are vastly underestimating how much better Pyosik played than Owner in this series. Not that I don't think Owner's a good player, but just what I think happened. This game opens up with Lee Sin, the much stronger early game jungler. Pyosik does a good job of getting all small krugs after the first one is smited, and then he goes on to red, it's warded, and he starts fighting it and pulling it out. Owner thinks that the red has reset. It actually has not reset, and then Pyosik ends up getting it. Owner then loops around because he can't figure out whether the red is reset or not, and ends up wasting a ton of time. That's a very good early game for Viego. Viego does not want to get messed up by Lee Sin. You even see Lee Sin trying to check the red with his Q. So overall, this early game, just the start, went to Pyosik. I love Pyosik. It feels really good that DRX ended up winning Worlds, because like I've just been in Pyosik's corner for like a long time. He's like the smartest dumb guy you'll ever meet. His pathing's really good through all of Worlds, even though you'll see him like make these goofy plays. Like overall, like he did a really great job as a jungler. All right, so let's take a look at another play here. I also want to highlight that Deft, for the most part, really struggled in the series, and I'm gonna highlight some plays to sort of show that. Basically, every game, like something goes a little bit poorly bot lane. This one was just a straight overstay, maybe nerves, right? Like maybe he's waiting on an item and I'm uncertain of the gold values, but a mistake nonetheless, right? And Deft is gonna make a ton of those during this series. Here's And then we're gonna look at some of the dragon steals, because this was like a big point of debate for a lot of people. Obviously, Pyosik was supposed to get this dragon, but I also want to say that Gumayusi, super comfortable on the Varus. This guy has ice in his veins. Other than maybe like game 5, like just like a really excellently played series from Gumayusi, and just like a very good Varus player. This play here, I thought we'd look at like the first like actual dragon fight. So let's actually talk about team comps for real here, right? Like Yone is off split pushing. Aatrox has to match him. Kingen, by the way, played really well this series, or played well the whole series. I think people only noticed him turn on towards the end. I actually think even this first game he plays really well, even though he does definitively lose lane to Zeus. Zeus is a very good Aatrox counter pick in the Yone, but it's still a good game played by Kingen. But we can see both top laners sort of splitting against each other, which is what T1 wants to happen. And then T1 has this comp where they can play defensively, and DRX just sort of have to dive onto them. I would like to say historically, I think teams that dive do better at the very upper echelon of League of Legends, because it gives you more proactivity. But as I've said, DRX is kind of like a massive underdog, and T1 I don't think need to commit. Like, I think T1 in theory can play more teamfight, passive, get dove, ball strategies and come out the victor. But anywho, here we see a fight where Owner gets the dragon. DRX's only mode is to dive. Heimer doesn't really know what to do because he can't actually follow up, and T1 just gets a clean disengage. I can't even remember what clips I chose. Oh yeah, I thought I'd just show like, I don't know, just like highlight that Kingen, like, I think started the series playing well. Like, you can see he's pretty on here. Like, he almost gets Faker. They dive, T1 dives a little too hard on Pyosik here. Kingen, like, he's just going, you know, flashes for this. Gumayusi just dies off this by not having his own flash. Like, you know, dude's just like, he's trying, you know, like I can see it, like I can feel it, like he's, you know, even at the start of the series, he's in it to win it. This next play I wanted to just highlight quickly. I think one thing Faker did really excellently this series is his macro was incredibly on point. I loved how fast he was on his movements whenever there was a decision point to make on what he should do. Right here, T1 and DRX are setting up for this dragon. Faker very quickly beelines to the mid lane, gets that wave pushed in, pressures the mid turret while both teams are sort of setting up for this dragon. Faker was just very fast on these plays, very little hesitation for any macro play of the series. And I wanted to highlight that a little bit because I thought this play here was like a very obvious example of that. All right, cool. The series isn't like, or sorry, this first game isn't super exciting. It's mostly a T1 stomp. As T1 doesn't actually use very much of the split pushing strategy. They kind of win too hard early and don't need to do anything fancy. They sort of group and win. I don't think like anything that interesting happened from splitting with Yone. Like Yone just sort of grouped and was a menace in that regard. And it was just an overall clean victory. Nothing too much I want to say here. I think Zeka also kind of had a bad first game, and then he gets his footing in the second game and sort of just ends up playing a phenomenal final 4 games. Yeah, and like not a fantastic early game from Owner. But that's what I wanted to say about that. Let's move on to game 2. Cool. Okay, so now we're in the draft for game 2. Yumi's still banned. This time DRX is on blue side. Blue side wins the first 4 games of the series. They have the option to try and say we're going to take Lucian if you leave it up, but instead they ban it. The implication there is that we don't want to play Lucian into your Varus, so instead we're just going to ban Lucian on blue side. They also don't want to give the opportunity for a blind pick Rise, which is shocking, and they just get rid of it now. The red side bans are pretty straightforward, except then the Sejuani makes its return. T1 just says, like, we really don't want to deal with that. Very interesting, but that's just how the series goes. And DRX, for their final ban, go with Renata and say, we're fine with you taking, or sorry, we're fine with taking our first pick ADC, which we're about to see, which is Varus. We just don't want you to give Renata in return. And we'll see later why they don't want to, even though it doesn't work out. But anywho, now it's on T1. They see that DRX has Varus, and they can choose their answer to it. So they say, okay, this time we're going to be the ones with the Aatrox. Aatrox is a great hero, and we're going to take Ashe. So this was a pretty interesting draft, I felt. I did not like this early Ashe pick. So they want to deal with Varus, and they're sort of threatening Ashe Heimer here, because Heimer didn't get banned this game. This Ashe it's a very interesting draft. We'll play it out, but it's this Ashe pick sort of pigeonholes them into like a comp they don't, like not the strongest comp they can play. And we'll see what happens. So T1 can do a lot with their draft right now, right? Very flexible. Same with DRX. And then, so it's now, the ball's now in DRX's court to show what they want to do. Okay, so they don't want to let Ashe Heimer through, so they instead take the Heimer. They're saying, we're just going to play Ashe Varus. We can sort of infer that maybe they want to do like some sort of double Comet, like very strong lane strategy. And then we also see the Camille counter pick to Aatrox. Let me talk about the Camille briefly. So Camille was a very interesting pick throughout this tournament because top lane was so dominated by Aatrox, and it's basically either you leave Aatrox up or you have to like find a way to beat him, right? Whether that's like Fiora or whatever. Camille's a fascinating hero because kind of like the quintessential skill that you can have as a Camille player is your ability to break even, because she'll be so threatening in the late game, in the side lane, and when she's like out rotating the other top laner. Basically, like the main skill that you can have as a Camille player, in my opinion, is your ability to break even. There were basically only two players in the whole tournament, I felt, that could really break even in this Camille Aatrox matchup and be threatening with her on late game. And those two players are Kingin and Zeus. Zeus, I thought, is by far probably the best mechanical Camille I saw in this tournament, and I think he's probably just one of the best mechanical, from a mechanic standpoint, Camille's in the world. However, Kingin, who I felt made mistakes in his Camille game previously, was incredibly good at just breaking even and like being a threat later because he didn't put himself behind. As long as you're not behind on Camille, there's like a very clear-cut strategy to winning the game. Cool, right? Anywho, let's keep looking at the draft. What do these picks mean? So we got a Camille counter pick to Aatrox, but we are off tempo with Ryze and Varus again. Or sorry, with Heimer and Varus. Heimer and Varus are going to probably want to stand back and poke, siege, and Camille is going to want to dive in. Well, unlike last game, I'm more forgiving of them doing this because we know that they have the option to commit to a Camille split push strategy, and let me show you a game where this came into play, and it was very potent. In this draft of T1, the first game of T1 versus RNG, they go with the Ashe Heimer strategy and a Camille split pusher. This is a very strong comp, right? It is hard to dive. It's hard to dive and push into an Ashe Heimer duo, right? Because they clear the waves so well, and they're just hard. It's hard to dive onto Heimer, right? And you can facilitate this comp by other stuff that's hard to dive into and other stuff that's good at clearing waves. Victor, Graves, right? Those are not easy to dive, and those are great at clearing waves, you know? Like, if those four are left together, even if you outnumber them, it's really hard to beat them by diving onto them, and you can just sort of leave the Camille to split push, even though none of those heroes are going to be able to help Camille team fight, right? Like, they can't... This team is just not cohesive in being able to follow up Camille dives, right? Like, something that would follow up a Camille dive is like a Sedge. Like, Sedge could go in with her, you know? But these champions wouldn't be able to. Right? And it's like it's very much just saying like, look, we're playing a split push strategy. And once again, this is a split push non-team fight strategy that went extremely well for T1 against a team that was very good at team fighting. And DRX is basically threatening, we can do this same comp that you guys played, you know? And T1 now knows this, and they're like, okay, what can we do to disrupt this, right? So let's see what they do. First of all, they need to deal with Heimer, so they go Lux. I don't know. I'm going to assume that this Lux was just picked as a Heimer counter, but when I was watching it, I kind of felt like it could have been mid. Obviously, I just don't know, and I didn't see them talk about it in the conference. My apologies if I missed it. But I think there was somewhat of a possibility this could have been a mid Lux, because Lux is mainly going to be shut down by maybe a Sylas mid pick this game. If perhaps DRX does want to go Sylas, they're somewhat dissuaded to do so because it doesn't fit their strategy of Camille hard split pushing while the other 4 is an unkillable core, right? Like once you include Sylas, like it's more of a 1-3-1 or like, it's not quite the same strategy. So I don't know. To me, it could have been a Lux pick, sort of like saying like, okay, now you have to go Sylas to dissuade us from sending Lux middle, and then you can't play this like one-man split push comp you want to play. I don't know if any of that's true. It's just a possibility. Okay, anywho, DRX bans Nocturne, makes perfect sense. Owner played it already. It disrupts Camille's split push. And T1 ban Akali, which also sort of makes it seem like maybe they were going to go Lux middle. I don't know. And then of course they just banned Kindred. Makes sense to ban Kindred one tricks champions. That makes sense to me. But Kindred is also the natural counter to Graves, and they do decide to go Graves here. So T1 is playing a very similar strategy where they're like, okay, we're also a ball comp where we want to get Dove. We're just going to beat you at your own game because we have 2 forms of initiate that you don't have in the Ashe Arrow and the Lux Q. But you're going to see in a moment how they sort of like mess up their comp by not giving themselves proper peel. Like we have some pick and we have chances like getting Dove on and we have some pick, but we're not amazing at peeling when you dive in onto us, which is an issue when DRX decides to round out their comp by just saying, screw it, we're going to go Viego and we're going to go Sylas. Fine. Now it's like somewhat of a 1-3-1, but also like just sort of a disjointed team fight where people are not on the same page, and we're just going to run into the same issue of like, all right, everyone's sort of diving in and Heimer doesn't have a purpose. Fine. That's what DRX wants to play. Maybe yes, their comp's disjointed. They're not all on the same page about what they want to do. However, it is going to mess up what SKT wants to do, where they thought they were going to be fighting more of like a ball get Dove comp, and now they're fighting a much high. Now instead, DRX is playing much more of a dive comp in the Camille and the Viego and the Sylas, and because of that, T1 have not drafted a lot of peel, and they end up finalizing their comp with the Victor and just saying like, okay, we're just going to outpick you with the Ashe and Lux, and we're just going to play a ball comp into what you're playing. In my opinion, because of this early Ashe draft, it sort of just makes it that they don't have proper peel. I'm not sure what the exact strategy could have been. I think they could have threatened with the Lux still and maybe just knock on Ashe, and then like it's all very hard to say, right? Like maybe at that point, like DRX doesn't want to take the Heimer, so then like T1 sort of threatened to take it on the rebound. I don't know. There's like a lot of ways this could have gone. But I do think DRX kind of messed up what T1 wanted to do, and now T1 is playing like this not super proactive comp at World Finals, Even if maybe on paper like T1's comp could be a little better in theory, it's just not a lot of proactivity when you need to win World Finals. Okay, so let's look at some plays in this game. First thing I want to highlight, Kingen. It does a good job of breaking even, of course. He was the first fight in the game. I thought Zeus played this fight excellently, just like super solid, gets the kill. Kieria roams up and does like a great job there. And then Zeus just like good auto cancels, good dodges, just like super well played. Nice way to start the game. I'm going to like talk about Lux support briefly before this clip rolls. In my opinion, Lux support just like is terrible. It's once again another win more hero where you just need to like smash lane, and the only way to really make it good is to get it to snowball with a lot of AP, and you just don't have a lot of income on support. That like sucks as a strategy to me. It's like very one-dimensional and snowball-y, and this game sucks more because like Kyria kind of like comes to conclusion he needs to go in Mikhail, so he doesn't even have AP. However, with that being said, he basically plays like the best Lux support game I've ever watched. So maybe like what I think is good isn't so important when you just play like a super great game of League of Legends. And that's just like a great play mix there. I think I'm just gonna like click around this clip a bit, but I don't know what else I want to show. Oh yeah, I'll show this like fight here. Like once again, like Kingin like gets out Zeus's ult. This is like a really great position, pushing in wave. Aatrox no ult. Kingin is now just like baiting for Heimer, which is super solid. I'm like interested in the way he played this. I like don't know how you're supposed to play it or if this is intentional, but he opts for ulting the Aatrox second Q and then flashing third Q while maintaining the Hextech ultimatum. I don't know if he did that just to like bait for Heimer, but it sort of feels like he's supposed to hold his R for the third Q. I don't know. It ends up working out, so who am I to say? Next thing I want to highlight in this game is that as of the start of this game, Owner has a 3-0 lead on Graves in a comp where Graves is like pretty solid. Graves is going to be good against 3 of the 5 heroes on DRX, right? He'll be good into Camille, Viego, and Silas to an extent because those kind of have to like meet Graves at the range he wants to play. This is like that's a lot of gold on Graves, and I think Owner is certainly capable of taking over the game from this point, and I want to be critical of him because I think he probably should have, and I don't think he did what needed to be done. And the first like big mistake here is like them getting sort of caught here, right? Owner gets caught, the shutdown goes to Viego. I don't think like Pioshik like just jungle diffed this game necessarily, but like I certainly think Owner could have done more. I'm not sure what else do I want to show of this game. I guess what I want to say is basically like the way this game ends up playing out is DRX has more proactivity, and they end up actually taking T1, and they end up winning the early game for the most part. Owner cannot convert his Graves lead, but then T1 managed to take it back. Faker goes like a super defensive Crown Janya's build and just sort of scales up until he's 6 items, and Faker just has like a very good game in general on the Victor, to the point where, damn, like we're versus 6 item Victor, you know, like T1 actually start to win the game, and then for some reason they don't win the game, and we can watch them not win the game. So let's take a look at the team fight. I want to talk about how this is like a really good clip to highlight how these comps work. So when you're fighting a ball comp, right, a comp that just wants to all stand on each other, but they don't draft a lot of peel. So we're going to see the issue with the early Ashe draft, right? We got a comp that wants to all stand on each other, grind you down when you dive into us, but we didn't draft peel. We don't have a Gragas, we don't have a Thresh, right? Like we just don't have a solid way of doing that. However, you still need to actually beat them in the fight. If we all stand as 5 and we run into the red comp here, then we're going to lose, right? We're just playing into what they want to do. So you have to disrupt them somehow, and the way you do that is by flanking. And the best person to be flanking here is by far Camille. Camille actually has ways of managing Ashe and Lux's CC, and Kingin knows exactly what the plan is, and he knows exactly what he has to be doing. So he's threatening the backline, even though he's missing vision, even though they're versus 6 item Victor. I'm not saying the start of this fight goes perfectly, but definitely they're on the right play. They're on the right wavelengths of what to do. Yes, right now it's top being zoned for support, but like we know that in a perfect world, like DRX doesn't take too much damage, and this is just a free kill for Kingin, right? And then it should, in theory, start off as a 4v5 once Kingin kills Kira. Unfortunately, T1 gets too much damage off prior to that. But it's like pretty good, right? He's also like drawing Owner here. Like he totally does the right thing. That is how like these sort of disjointed comps are supposed to deal with ball comps, especially when you make it to 45 minutes. All right, so I wanted to point out great on Kingen, like he just plays an excellent all 5 games. And then we can watch the final dragon here, where Kyria is dead and Seka is dead. Once you got Varus in this situation, so I should talk about this. Deft opts for the lethality Varus build. Makes a lot of sense when you're playing into a comp that wants to be Dove, right? They're just going to play passively and play as a group. You defeat them by outranging them with Siege, right? So Deft, of course, goes the lethality build. And this is sort of like the breaking point of the game because T1 is all but clawed back into it. And this is pretty much a T1 victory at this point. But thanks to some like really great playmaking from Deft and Kingen, it doesn't quite go T1's way. So Deft is poking as he should be, and he lands a really good Chains of Corruption onto Faker here. Faker has options, right? Like not options, like, you know, he wants to try and dodge this, but he doesn't. I'm not actually sure what spells are up, but I can't. Yeah, I think he had John use. Yeah, he was supposed to John use it. That's what I recall. But he doesn't. He waits until this point, and we can watch. Once the Chains of Corruption goes out, Kingen goes for a Camille E onto the wall into an E flash. Right, really great play. Hits Zeus and Faker here. Stuns Faker, forces Faker to Zhonya's. And now we're versus late game Camille. She's just going to be tanky. Gumayusi's tanking the Baron. We're able to finish off Faker. Kingen is just sort of drawing Zeus away now. Deft is able to solo Gumayusi. Like, just what a like excellently played fight. Like, really, really amazing job from Deft and Kingen here. Just able to win this game. That seems like already a T1 victory. So that was cool. That was really cool. All right, let's now move on to game 3. All right, so once again, taking blue side. Blue side has been working. T1 opts for blue side again. They're going to continue by taking away Akali, and they're going to take away Sedge and Ashe. Like, these are just, this right here, the most standard bans these teams are going to go for. It's been working more or less for both of them. And then we're going to see the Varus first pick. Fine. DRX knows the T1's gonna first pick Varus. Like, we just know this is gonna happen. What is DRX's plan? They say, we've got you. We're gonna go a early game, just dive comp. Here we go. Kalista and Renata. We're beating your ass in lane. That is our plan. So the thing about Kalista is Kalista's really only good at running forward. Unless, like, somehow you're fighting, like, a full melee comp. It just doesn't usually happen. Then, like, she can sort of, like, play at a mid-range and kite. However, usually she's just running into things for the most part. It kind of... T1 should know, for the most part, what direction DRX is going to move with their draft. But, yeah, DRX puts their foot down. They're like, we're just going to beat you up with Kalista. T1 says, all right, we are going to go with Azir. We think this hero is really good. We have the range advantage with Varus, and we think you're going to run into us. We're going to pick Azir because Azir likes getting dove on. And we're going to also pick Karma because even though I personally don't think Karma is a good hero whatsoever, Karma is good in scenarios where you want to even out the lane, right? Where you want to stabilize the lane, and she doesn't make you lose endgame in the process, right? She's good in those scenarios. So that's what they do here. They say, all right, if we can get through lane phase with Karma, no problem. Then we don't mind picking it. DRX continue. They're just like, yep, we're diving today. That's what we're doing. We got Kalista for early game. We're going to beat up Varus in lane. Are going to beat you early, and we're going to win the game. That is the plan for game number 3. And they continue it with the Sylas. Sure, it seems like both teams are aware of what each other want to do, right? T1's going to keep their distance, DRX is not. So let's see what they ban to try and make this happen. First thing DRX says is like, all right, we like playing Aatrox. We would like Aatrox again if possible. It's kind of like even surprising that they don't go Aatrox. They could in theory go Aatrox instead of Sylas, but they just don't want like Sylas Victor banned and then just leaving only like A or B tier mids instead of like one of the many S tier ones, so they instead take the Sylas. It's just like interesting the ways it could have gone. But DRX is saying, yeah, we would really like Aatrox again, so we're going to ban Yone. Okay, and this is basically a handshake. T1 says, okay, well, if you ban Yone, we have to ban Aatrox because we don't have a good counter to it. Fine. This is a tell, though, and is important for later in the series because this means that they don't feel comfortable playing Camille into it. Because they could, in theory, commit to just like another Camille split push strategy. DRX say, let's get Lee Sin off the table. Now we can sort of threaten Kindred. T1 say, nope, you're not playing Kindred this whole series. And then DRX just continue with what they're comfortable doing and pick this hero that I don't think is good whatsoever, known as Viego. Cool. DRX just continues. They're like, yep, we're full dive. T1's like, yep, we are not diving. And they rectify the mistake they made last game. And they say, we are picking a peel hero because we were desperately lacking that last game. Now we have a lot of DPS threats, but we also have someone that's really going to help us peel by picking Gragas top. Great pick. I really like that they did that. DRX then make a pretty interesting decision. They say, we could use a little end game in case Kalista does snowball early game. And we want to continue to initiate, so we're going to go Ornn, making a very cohesive comp from DRX. Actually, the most cohesive comp we've seen them draft in this series so far. Two very cohesive comps, very standard League Legends. I want to get dove on. I want to dive into you. Cool, right? My big criticism here of the DRX draft is if we watch the first two games, Deft has been struggling in lane phase, and Kingan has been hard carrying. It's going to be a lot. And DRX is committed to a strategy where Deft has to do well in lane and Kingan doesn't get to hard carry. That is my main criticism, you know? And because of that, like when I watched this draft live, I sort of felt like, I think, you know, I think this looks better for T1, you know? But we can see how it plays out. So I just want to continue to show, like, Deft, one of the best players to ever play the game, does not have a good lane phase. This looks like a 1-for-1, but it ends up like just with a wave not where DRX needs it to be, and the rest of the game is basically just this massive CS gap between Gumayusi and Deft. And even with Deft picking up kills in the mid game, like it's just like it puts him so behind that when watching the series, like I already had that feeling of like dread for DRX where I'm like, man, like I don't think they could win this. Like literally like at this point, like already like 7 minutes in, I was like, I don't know if DRX is winning this game, you know? Like I was already really feeling it because it was so important for Kalista to get ahead in this one. Anywho, let's watch this mid lane fight. I just want to show like a nicely played by Zeka, like he flashes after, waits, right, gets his E off, like it just nicely played, tries to run away from the Karma, almost gets away from the chain, just like solidly played all around. Gets away from Gragas, just buys time, best of his ability. He's doing his best, but we can sort of like see how like some of this early game is going. Like DRX is trying their best to be proactive because they have all these proactive tools. But you know, at every point we look at the game, like Gumayusi's just an item spike ahead, and you can't, like, you need to snowball as Kalista. That just can't happen. So here we have like somewhat of an actual team fight at Dragon. Let's sort of take a look at how it goes. When you play these sort of like comps that want to get dove, you want to stand as a ball and you want to be on the objective, right? They don't want to be disjointed and they don't want to like flank or anything. Those are all like bad plays if you're T1's comp. Faker, as you can see, like was able to like shove up middle and hover around. Zeka is TPing for the fight. DRX badly wants to engage on this fight, which I thought was very interesting. They committed Zeka's TP. I think they're just trying their best to be proactive and win fights to the best of their ability. But this was a very interesting fight, I thought, they tried to take, because Dragon's already dead. T1's very hard to initiate on. T1's not disrupted at all, right? DRX hasn't flanked, like, Silas hasn't flanked, although it's going to be very hard for that to work this game, just because of the nature of their draft. And then, like, Gumayusi already has his Rage Blade. Def doesn't. There's a ton of flashes missing from DRX. Only Beryl has his flash up, whereas T1 still has their flashes. Like, I just never see this play working. And we can see like how easy it is for T1 to just run away and disengage, you know, like it's just like a very chill time. This was a great flash by Beryl. Doesn't quite work. Like, that was really close. It's like super unfortunate that Faker lives there. And then we can take a look at like the dragon that doesn't work out. So even though Callista's mainly an early game hero, the one like really awesome positive you get from her in all situations is that she's super good at doing Baron because she smites it really well with her E. So once again, Pyosik got a lot of hate for his smites this series, even though I would say that he objectively plays better than Owner in games 1, 3, 4, and Owner doesn't even play very well in game 2. Yeah, I don't know. Like Owner just has like a bad series, and Pyosik has like a pretty decent series other than what it perceived of his smites. Anywho, what happens here is Callista rends, and then they don't quite smite on top of it, and Owner ends up getting it. This just seems like a communication or nerves issue. Like you're just supposed to communicate your smiting and rending at the same time. I don't know what happened in their comms. Like I don't know who to point the blame at, right? Maybe Deft called it and Pyosik just didn't do it, right? Maybe Deft said let's do it at this HP and Pyosik like nerves didn't do it. I don't know, right? But it could be anyone's fault. I don't think this is just like definitively Pyosik messing up his smite. But yeah, that sucks because DRX actually like sort of once again like scrappily finds a way back into the game by just like having a much more proactive comp. As I said before, like I think in general, being a comp that wants to be dove is good into a comp that strictly dives. However, once we reach like world finals, world semifinals, the higher echelon, the top percentage of competitive League of Legends, just being proactive is more helpful than having a counter comp historically. And then we'll watch like the last Baron here, where once again DRX somehow, somewhat in the driver's seat. They're trying to abuse Callista's rend. They get a great catch onto Faker. Big mistake on Faker here. They got the rend stacks. Big mistake to let Zeka die. I think like everyone's just really feeling the nerves in this game. So this was like a really funny fight where there's just a lot of misplaying and a lot of just like goofy plays in general. But then like once again, we have all the rends in. They just seem to not call when to smite correctly because Deft throws out a random E here, dropping the Baron to 1300. I think Pyosik tries not to make the mistake he did last fight, and he was like, oh shit, Deft rended, I was supposed to smite with it, so he smites, but that just puts it in range for Varus' arrow. Once again, it's some weird communication issue. You're supposed to just communicate what health your smite rending at, and it's supposed to be 100%. It's not supposed to be variable whether you get it or not. There's just some nerves going on. But yeah, that ends up just being a win for T1 this game. I don't think I have anything more to add on to this one. That one just plays out like that. And then we are on to game 4. This DRX has now chosen blue side off of that loss. They're going to continue to ban Lucian, right? We already talked about this before. They said we'd rather ban Lucian as opposed to playing Lucian into Varus. T1 doing very standard blue side bans. Surprisingly, doesn't open with Yumi. I don't know what it quite means. DRX is still saying like, yeah, let's just like get rid of Ryze, and also we don't want to fight Ashheimer. Sure, right? T1 also say we don't want you first picking Heimer. Okay, I guess. I don't think it would have been a big deal, but that's what they said. And then DRX is like, okay, Varus is still up, and I don't want you to have Varus. Let's just pick it. Sure. T1 says, all right, you had a Varus counter last game. Let me show you our Varus counter. And they do the same thing. They go Callista. However, they left Sejup this time in favor of banning Heimer, so they're able to go Sejuani. Ooh, interesting. So as we know from the pick ban, T1 is super scared of DRX playing Sej, so they just take it, which is interesting, you know? DRX say like, okay, Renata's not banned, and you guys didn't take Renata, which I kind of thought you were going to, so we'll just play Renata Varus, you know? We're fine doing that. And then for their last first rotation pick, they're like, okay, we got Renata Varus. We don't need to draft and initiate comp here. We already see that you're going to be initiating a lot with Sedge and Kalista. We're going to play like more of an anti-dive like you've been doing with the Azir. Cool. Everyone seems like they're on the same page. And now is like an interesting decision point for T1. T1 does not have the option to go Renata with their Kalista. And as this tournament has progressed, people have moved away from melee supports. So T1 has done a pick that we've seen at other points in the tournament, and they've decided to go Soraka. I absolutely hate this move. Soraka is missing some of the lane prowess that Kalista needs to get ahead. I know people like this lane, and it's like a good way to like just keep Kalista alive and letting her do her thing, and still getting like an sort of enchanter style support on the table. But I hate this. I think they should just. I think Soraka in general is a bad hero. And I think that T1 should have just not picked support here. I think this could have been a red side last pick support just based on what happened. Just go for something counter comp. And once we get to that point in the draft, I'll sort of tell you what I think T1 could have done with their last pick. But I hate this. I absolutely hate that they went Soraka here. All right, T1 say we're going to get rid of Kindred so that we don't have to send Sedge top. Also, you just have a Kindred one trick, so we're just going to keep banning it. DRX said, oh, you guys didn't pick your mid lane. You guys usually do that, you know. Victor is the natural counter to Azir because he out-sieges him, so we're just going to ban that. T1 says, ha, we got your other jungle champion, Viego. Take that. Now what? And then DRX says, we're also going to get rid of Yone because Aatrox is still on the table and we want to play him. Cool. So there's a little decision that happened here. T1 could have picked Aatrox, but they kind of like, I don't know, T1 didn't have like they weren't like great at dealing with the Camille, and DRX is like, once again, just running a comp that could just be like a four-man squad with Camille split pushing. So they're just like, T1 say, all right, we're just going to follow up our dive comp by picking Akali because that's what's still up. I think Akali's considered pretty bad into Renata because Renata just sort of keeps the champ she jumps on alive. But T1 say, we're just diving. We're diving today. That's just what we're doing. And DRX says, nice, we got Aatrox. And then this is very, very interesting. Okay, so we know that DRX has picked a comp that wants to get dove on, and they've also committed to non-split push, but full team fighting by picking Aatrox, right? They didn't pick Fiora, they didn't pick Camille, they didn't pick Yone. They're just like, yeah, we're just team fighting, right? We want you to dive at us. You have picked full dive. And then they go Maokai, which we've seen Pioshik pick before. So Maokai's interesting. Let's talk about Maokai. And let's talk about the history of Maokai. So at this tournament, Maokai has a super low win rate. He is 7-14, and he did much better in play-ins and groups than he did outside of it, which is why people stopped sort of going him. And the reason for that is Maokai is very enabling to a lot of heroes in the game, right? Maokai is just Maokai. He's just the sort of safe tank. And that means like any sort of like proactive strategies you want to do or any sort of scaling strategies you want to do, it all works. Any strategy you feel like playing in the game works into Maokai, right? He's just not disruptive enough to what you want to do. Like, so it just gives you a ton of options. And that's why he tends to have really poor win rate. And I thought it was super fascinating seeing people jump on the sort of like Maokai top and Maokai top and jungle strategy, because I've been watching League for 12 years. This has happened before. This actually happened back in 2017. This was the Ardent Sensor meta. At Worlds, at the early stage of the tournament in scrims, everyone decided that they wanted to play Maokai, but Maokai's so enabling for a lot of strategies, it had a below 30% win rate. And one of the main strategies that was used to counter it was Cho'Gath, right? Cho'Gath is just a hard scaler. You pick Maokai, people can do whatever they want. And people decided, hey, what I want to do is pick the incredibly hard scaler Cho'Gath, and it worked. And they also would pick proactive stuff like Gnar, and that would work too. It all just worked. That's what happens when you pick Maokai. It opens up a ton of strategies. However, the reason that happens is because people like to pick Maokai in the same way they like to pick Ornn, or they like to pick Aatrox, because it's safe, right? They like to pick it blind, which opens up a lot of options. That's not what DRX did this game. They did not pick it early in the draft. They did not pick it blind. They picked it when they had seen 4 champions already. They saw 4 heroes that want to dive in and said, wait, I know who stops people from diving. I got it right here. His name's Maokai. This was actually a perfect Maokai draft. I think maybe people watching at home might have been critical, just being like, okay, Maokai in the later stages of Worlds did not have a good win rate post play-ins. But if you know why Maokai was doing poorly, which is his ability to enable picks, then you'll sort of think to yourself, you know what? I think he's actually good here. He's going to do a great job at being anti-dive, right? He'll just catch Kalista, catch Akali as they try and go in, and we're Gucci. Anywho, let's talk about the very final portion of this draft where T1 decides to go Fiora. So we talked about it before. T1 sort of already revealed their cards a bit. They don't have a great way at dealing with DRX. And based on Fiora's priority in this series compared to every other series, we know that whatever happened in scrims or just whatever both teams are thinking, they don't have as high a priority on Fiora, and they don't think that they can just close out wins by playing it. Because obviously the priority on it is so much lower in this series than other games we've watched at Worlds. And yeah, T1 lightly implied, like, yeah, we're not actually super comfortable. Even though Zeus is really good at Camille and it worked before, we don't actually think it's going to work if he plays as Camille into Kingen. Like, we think Kingen's just going to do too well, you know? And they're probably right. So T1 ended up going Fiora. I will say, Camille would have been super cohesive with the rest of T1's dive comp. And also, personally, I love playing Camille with Sedge. Camille Sedge is just a really strong 2v2. So I would have liked to see it here, even if they don't split push with it. I think just to even split rotate team fight, like, I think it would have felt pretty good. Also probably would have made Soraka feel a little bit more viable. But they go for Fiora for a split push strategy instead. They say we just don't think we're gonna survive lane versus Kingen. So now we have a comp where T1 have to do well early. This is basically a reverse of last game. One team wants to get dove, one team wants to dive. And this time T1 has the Kalista with the early game, and they're like, all right, we need Fiora to do well, and we need Kalista to do well. Game starts off, Deft does not do well. The margins here were super tight. He has 2 deaths like this. He's already died once, as you can see. But it's basically 2 deaths where the margins were super tight. It just doesn't, like, he just does not have a good series from a laning perspective at all. So that's good, right? Sort of getting Kalista a little online, even though Soraka gets the kills. But let's take a look at how things go top lane, because it's also very important that Fiora gets ahead in this game. So Kingen here, hugging the wall as he should be, not allowing Fiora to have her last vital. Both teams are coming in. PO6 coming in here. T1 is a little faster on the rotate with Soraka here, but Kingen just plays it super well. They DPS down Owner. He gets the flash 3rd Q, and Owner already doesn't have flash because I think he uses his bottom. And just continued super great play from Kingen, and now even the follow-up, he gets a flash out of Kieria. So I don't know, just like it was very important that Fiora could get ahead in this game, because Fiora is supposed to just beat up Aatrox in lane, and T1 just needs to like snowball and get ahead this game, and they can't do it. Kingen just plays too well. Here we can actually check out how when the team fights go. Zeus is up top, just pulling away a fight, as is what you want to happen. And then the reason I kind of want to highlight this fight is because it's kind of just winning for DRX for the most part. But I guess what I want to show is, like, I think Faker feels really pressured to like carry the game, so he goes for like a very aggressive play here. He lands the E onto Zika and he Qs, but he hits Deft. I don't know if it's intentional. I feel like he wanted to hit Zeka probably, but he hits Deft, and then he just sort of gets out Deft's shield bow and dies for it. Like, I think Faker's really feeling the pressure here. Faker I'd say plays a pretty like excellent first 3 games and then sort of a questionable final 2 games. Not an easy game to navigate Akali in, and I think he feels the pressure that he needs to carry here because Fiora just did not do very well. And they want to win these early fights because they have Kalista. We can also like briefly look at after this lost fight, we could look at item spikes again. We saw this last game as well. They go for a fight. Kalista doesn't have her item yet. Varus does have his item. Faker doesn't have his item. Zika does have his item. Like, I think they're just feeling the pressure to try and make the early game work because they certainly don't win the late game, and Fiora's already behind. So they're taking this fight with missing items, and it just, they die. Like, I don't know, it's sloppy and it doesn't work. And then here we can take a look at this final fight here. DRX is on Baron, and Faker gets caught. Faker definitely should not be getting caught here. Great job on Pyosik and Kingen. But the reason I wanted to highlight this is I thought it was really cool what happened. So they get a nice pick onto Faker. T1 is playing a full dive, like we can all follow each other up comp. And they say, let's run the hell in while they're killing Faker, which I actually think is pretty smart and probably the best way to navigate this. If Kingen has a little worse awareness, he could be here in theory much more slowly, but he's here pretty quickly. And T1 just keeps running forward, like, please don't make me deal with Kingen and Pyosik. Let's just go onto the back line. It's pretty good. Like, they managed to actually stop DRX from doing Baron here, so it does kind of work. But I thought this was just like sort of a cool way that it was played. But yeah, once Fiora's behind and like Kalista isn't accelerated, like this game's pretty much over. There's not, like, it's done. There's not much more to talk about. Which brings us to game 5. The final game in what a lot of people would call the coolest world finals we've had. And then everything's on the line. I love game 5s. Like, I love world finals. I love games at worlds. I love game 5s, like, because when you're drafting in these games, you know, you are putting all your cards on the table. Your soul is exposed for all to witness. You know, whatever your favorite champs are, whatever you think is going to win you the game, you have to play it now. You know, like, whatever your preconceived notions of League of Legends are, none of those matter, because you have to win the game. You don't have a choice. So you have to do whatever you think is going to make you win. Anywho, we still get the Akali ban from blue side at T1. T1 lost last game, so they get game 5 blue side, even though blue side has now won 4 games in a row. So you might think it should be a T1 victory. And the first bans go like this. T1 says, all right, let's get rid of the Heimer. We don't want to have to deal with that bottom. DRX continue to say, we don't want to deal with Lucian. We don't want to play Varus into it. And this time T1 say, all right, Sedge is up. We are going to ban Renata this game. And the reason they're doing that is because they don't want there to be a good counter when they go Varus. And I think the obvious thing for DRX to do right here is be like, okay, Varus has won 4 games in a row, right? Like, the obvious play here is for DRX to ban Varus right now. But this is where stuff gets super interesting. Because usually at this point, you ban Caitlyn, right? Usually they ban Caitlyn at this point, but they have to ban Varus, right? Logically, you would think so. So DRX say, you know what? We've actually got a strategy, and it's pretty fascinating. And they go with a Lux ban. Okay, cool, right? So Lux, you know, usually paired with Caitlyn. DRX is saying, if you go Varus right now, we're super comfortable to play Caitlyn into it without Lux. And if you go Caitlyn, we don't mind playing it as long as you don't get Lux with it. Which is like quite the gamble. And now T1 has to figure out, okay, well, do we want Varus or do we want Caitlyn? What side are we more comfortable playing? Once again, fascinating. And so I would say DRX banning Lux, kind of brilliant. Or at least, like, if, you know, like, sort of moves the draft in a way that they can outmaneuver T1. And I think T1's response is kind of brilliant too, because they're choosing between Varus and Caitlyn, and they say karma. They're like, we don't actually care if we get Varus or Caitlyn. As long as we got karma with it, we'll win the lane. And they're probably right, you know? Karma probably will facilitate both those champions into a win, regardless of what it's paired with. So DRX now has their chance to come back, and they're like, all right, Azir's been doing really well, and we know Azir's good with comps that want to stand back a bit, and you know who stands back? Caitlyn stands back, and we're going to take Caitlyn. That's the side of this matchup we are interested in playing. You can have your Varus. We don't mind if you're potentially playing Varus double Comet with Karma. That's a very tough lane, but we're fine. We're going to take some S tier picks. T1 says sure. We're going to play the natural counter to Azir, have some additional siege on you, and we're going to go Varus Carmen. We're going to beat up Caitlyn lane. We don't mind that you got Caitlyn. With that being said, Aatrox has been an absolute menace this series. Kingan's been a menace, and Aatrox has been a menace the entire tournament. T1 did not do anything about it. It's just been left up. And they say, yeah, just take Aatrox. We don't want to wait until second rotation bans for you to take all the good mids off the table. We'd rather have Victor now. I would say debatably, don't pick Victor here. Pick Aatrox instead, and come up with something else. Because I can come up with like a bunch of crazy stuff that could be picked here. I'm not going to get into it now, but there are other siege heroes that exist in the game, you know? How well they deal with Caitlyn, that's like another story. But like I don't know, I could come up with crazy stuff. I could say like Ziggs, you know, like I don't know. I also don't want to like comment too much on mid lane because I don't know the matchups too well. But anywho, this is what we've gotten into so far. And then we start getting to bans. DRX is like, nice, we got Aatrox, we can just ban Yone, so you can't play it. D1's like, all right, let's get rid of some junglers, right? DRX keeps getting rid of Lee Sin, so like they kind of, I think the biggest portion of getting rid of Lee Sin is they threaten Kindred more. It's much easier to play Kindred. I mean, you can't really play Kindred if you're versus Lee Sin. So they sort of give themselves the opportunity, which means T1 has to ban Kindred, although they're probably going to anyways. Then DRX can pick whatever they want. And for some crazy reason, they go Bard. Okay. Bard is another terrible hero. So let's talk a bit about why they went Bard. So Bard offers basically no help in lane, which sucks. It sucks twice as much when you have to fight Varus Karma, who both are going to take Comet, because that's like a really hard lane to fight. And usually when you fight hard lanes, you want good laners, but instead they pick a terrible laner known as Bard, and one that I personally don't think is very good whatsoever. But let's look at some historical context, right, to try and make sense of this all. So what's good about Bard and Caitlyn? Caitlyn can kind of 2v1 lane, you know? Which means that if you were inclined to pick Bard, you wouldn't be as worried about him losing lane or not helping in lane, because Caitlyn's good at 2v1ing, right? You can kind of play whatever with her. And this is a strategy that we've seen both DRX and Beryl do. So let's take a look. Let's take a look back. This is a game from 2020 Worlds where DRX was versus top. Game didn't work out, but we can see that Deft and Piosik, we're playing with Kieria this time, went Caitlyn Bard. And the strategy is very straightforward. We want to play Kindred, but Kindred needs help getting marks, so we need to offer him support so he can get his marks. Bard, you roam around the map. I'll 2v1 the lane as Caitlyn. That's the strategy. And it didn't work this game, but that was the plan. And we've seen Deft and Piosik do it here. Similarly, we can look at this game played by Beryl, and the reason I show this game is it's another Kindred game. I guess we're just showing that like it's a game where he wants to help the jungler. More importantly, so this is from World Finals in 2020. More importantly, Beryl, when he previously won Worlds, his strategy was all about roaming around the map. And a great way to enable your support to roam is to pick something that can 2v1, right? Like, a lot of people play Caitlyn as a champion that can really bully lane, and why they go stuff like Lux, which I don't really agree with. But Damwon, when they won Worlds with Ghost, they played a lot of strategies where Ghost would just 2v1 lane, and Beryl could just go around as like Pantheon or whatever and help out. In this case, the idea is he would do so with Bard. Whether that works out or not, I'd say no. I think the Bard is just like kind of useless this game, just like a bad pick. But that was the plan, and I hope I offered some historical context. All right, so T1's like, you know what? Let's take Viego. We haven't had the opportunity. You guys, the other team took Bard for some reason. They're leaving their jungle as last pick. Also sort of surprising, but fine. They can do whatever they want. We, this time, are going to finally take the Viego. And we know you're not going to take Maokai, and we're not worried about it because Maokai sucks into our team comp, right? T1 is not diving with their comp, and Maokai stops dive. So if DRX did go Maokai, T1 would be like, nice, that's sick, you know? So it's definitely not going to happen. And then T1 have to once again find out how they're going to deal with Aatrox because they have not come up with a good counter, and they've implied twice now that they're not comfortable playing Camille into it despite doing it earlier in the tournament. So they're like, okay, let's go Gwen. And I have a lot to say on Gwen because I watched a lot of Zeus play Gwen when I was learning how to play Gwen myself. So this is like a pretty interesting matchup. Some people people will give you opinions on how they like playing both sides of it, but basically Gwen gets the early push on Aatrox, and then you have like a small window where you have to try not dying to him. And if you don't die to him, so basically after first back, if you don't die to Aatrox before your second back, you kind of win the game because Gwen scales so well. The problem is like a lot of the time after your first back, Aatrox does end up killing you. And I think one of the reasons is because if Aatrox lands a W on you, Gwen doesn't usually go flash, and like it's not very helpful for Gwen to have flash end game. So like there's not like a great way to get out of Aatrox's W. Like you don't have a good get out of jail free card. So it's a little tough to play. But I've seen Zeus play it. I know he can play it. Biggest downside is it's now like a lot of magic damage on the team, and that Kingin has just been playing out of his mind. Those are the two scary portions. Finally, DRX is available to pick their jungler, and DRX have been very clear in their intentions here. They're like, all right, Caitlyn and Azir are going to sit back, and T1's also like, yeah, we are also going to sit back, honestly. And then we can just expect that DRX is going to play something that'll help them just siege and sit back. Nope, just kidding. They're going Hecarim. They're just going to run at you. So DRX sort of pull like a bait and switch here, and they're like, it kind of looked like we were going to sit back and chill, but actually we're going to play Hecarim, and we're going to run into you. I don't know if they did this because PO6 sort of ran out of heroes, or if because it was actually like a bait, and they were like, once again, T1, although they're like a comp that wants to get dove onto, they didn't draft Peel, right? Like they don't have the Gragas like they had in Game 3. Like if they had the Gragas, they have the Peel to like actually stop the dive, but they don't in this scenario. So I don't know. It's like very interesting. Like it was an interesting choice from DRX. You know, I think I think this game can be the draft can be summarized pretty easily. T1 have a very cohesive comp that can siege and poke and wants to get dove on, and DRX have a super not cohesive comp where like Azir wants to stand back, but like Hecarim and Aatrox want to go in. However, DRX picked a bunch of S tier heroes. So I think if you're looking at this game, I think your internal dialogue is sort of like, what do I think is better? A cohesive team comp or like 3 S tier picks, Aatrox, Caitlyn, Azir, you know? We know how the game went. So the game's pretty interesting. We're just going to open up here by... I think this was Owner's best played game, and I just want to show like a cool play made at the start. Good job on Piosik. Level 1, Gumayusi and Kieria use their double comet to bully Piosik on his blue buff, but Piosik doesn't die and he recovers nicely. As I said, he just does a good job of pathing all 5 games. But this is like a good return kill from Owner, and then he does like a great job of Azir mechanics to use like the Azir banana combo to get all around the wall and kill Piosik. Doesn't look like this will be a kill, but it absolutely is. Great play. Like just a really great play from Owner, and good job from Zeus because, as I said earlier, Gwen gets the early push on Aatrox at most stages at the start of this matchup. Although I think he's died once by this point already. I think Zeus gets soloed at that point in the game. I tell him not to get soloed. Ugh. Yeah, Kingin's already like so strong. And then here, I think this is like a quintessential fight in the game. The main story of this game, of course, is that T1 like sort of just wins the game for the most part, and then DRX, like they've done the entire tournament, pull a win out of thin air. So here we can see T1. I can back it up a bit here, but they're doing what their comp is meant to do. They're super grouped, but they don't have like a hardcore peel hero, and DRX need to sort of disrupt this to the best of their ability, you know? So DRX is running all around them, trying to like break them up. Zeus kind of like gets a little disjointed here, trying to zone the backline, but then like DRX is just on them with Hecarim and Aatrox, and we know that Azir doesn't want to stand back because he needs to help with his boys in this matchup, so he really just has to jump in with his ult. He sort of needs to change his preferred mode of play. And Zeus tries his best here, but he was in like a weird spot to begin with, doesn't quite get the kill on Deft, and it's just not working out. And yeah, like Aatrox, there's just like a lot of magic damage in this game. Aatrox is able to go Maw this game as well, which is a big deal. Maw, by the way, was like Aatrox's build path, by the way, was also just like insane in game 4. Like it's basically a dream Aatrox game if you make it out of lane phase. But anywho, let's watch Dragon fight, see how things go a little more. I wanted to highlight this one just because like some people aren't going to understand the Gwen pick, and I want to highlight it. And I also want to talk about PO6 build a little bit after this play. But here we see Kyria is already dead because he steps on a trap for some reason. The DRX wants to capitalize on the 4v5, but you're going to see the value of Gwen against a sort of team comp like this. Gwen is able to put down her W, and she is not able to be affected by the backline while using Aatrox and Hecarim as just health sponges that she can heal off of and just deal max health damage. And like she basically one-shots Beryl has to flash. Then she's able to kill Aatrox and able to just follow up onto Hecarim. And that's perfect, right? Then we're just getting Victor shutdown, we're getting Viego resets. Like that's exactly what you want the fights to feel like when you're playing Gwen, and why Gwen, in theory, is really strong this game. I also just want to like highlight PO6 build a little bit here. I mean, builds were all over the place in this series, but specifically this game, PO6 opted for tank build. Like, I guess he won Worlds, so I don't have much ground to stand on here. But if I'm playing Gwen, I'm like so happy that Hecarim goes tank build here. He's just like a target that I can heal off of, you know? Like that feels great to me. I'm like pumped if I see Hecarim goes this build. It just makes my like MO so much more straightforward as the game goes on. So it was like, that was definitely a weird, it was like weird that PO6 opted for tank, but he won Worlds, so who am I to say? Did I have anything else I want to show in this clip? Don't think so. All right, so let's just take a quick look at the last fight here. Game was pretty much done when Mountain Soul was taken. It's just too hard for T1 to win once the Mountain Soul was taken. We can see how the fight goes. This last fight, like, T1's already like in a shaky spot. Caitlyn, despite losing lane super hard, is just like in the game and at too much range to deal with. T1 realizes really quickly they can't actually win the game, so they just like try and flip the Elder and start just TPing in the base, but it's all just falling apart around them. There's really just nothing they can do. But anywho, I do want to just highlight builds once again really quickly here. In most of my videos, 99.9% of the time, I'll like criticize builds, but I'll be like, at the end of the day, it's like very, very hard for a bad build to overpower good or bad gameplay, right? Like just playing well or poorly is just going to affect the game so much more than whatever you build. And I'd say like 99.9% of scenarios. Faker in this game goes for a 4th item Void Staff against Hecarim building full tank, 2nd item Maw Aatrox, and even Azir goes Banshees, which is like a questionable decision, and I think he goes a 3rd. Gwen like has identified how much magic damage there is, and I think he goes Void Staff 2nd this game. That was like a very bizarre decision on Faker to not get a Void Staff until 4th item. I think, like, I hate to say it, but I think debatably it cost them the game. I think debatably, if you go back and you watch some of the fights, you can kind of pinpoint times where Faker having more damage output would have won them fights and potentially the game. Because, T1 was in a good spot for most of this game. So that sucks, and I hate to say it, but it's a maybe. But anywho, I'll just give everyone like my final thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this like draft breakdown. The drafts were like all over the place. I thought they were overall like very interesting, but definitely like all over the place. I think for the most part, DRX played a lot of disjointed comps. And they were more just like looking for proactivity. Historically, our worlds, proactivity is better than a cohesive comp, I find. And I think T1 played cohesive comps, but I think they should have simplified their strategy because I think on paper, most people would say T1 was the stronger team. I think we all considered DRX the underdog, and I think T1 should just played like cohesive team fight comps, much like what they did, but maybe with like the inclusion of just some peel, so they're not playing like full siege, like they're not just like scared to get initiated on the whole time. Just stuff like comps that are more similar to what they played in game 3 with the Gragas, where it's like a team fight ball comp, not a lot of proactivity, but like more straightforward to navigate, because I think that might have worked out for them, and no need to rely on like split push or anything. I think that was one approach that T1 could have gone for. I don't know if it would have worked. Overall, I'm just gonna hit everyone with some thoughts on how I think all the players played. Zeus, great player, maybe the most mechanically gifted player at Worlds. Decisive losses in basically every game this series. Owner, I think, played pretty weak the first 4 games of the series, and I think he absolutely had the potential to carry his Graves game. Faker was really, really on point with his macro and very proactive. Even when Victor, I think going defensive items made him very proactive in an interesting way, but I don't think he was able to keep it together in the final 2 games. I don't know where he was mentally, but it just didn't seem like it was happening, and I think he may have cost his team the game by going such a late Void Staff in Game 5. Gumayusi, I think, is one of the best Varus I've ever watched. He's up there with Perks for me. And overall just played really well. I think he was shakiest Game 5 where he started missing some ults, but overall just a really great series from him, and 5 straight lane wins. Kyria also played really well. Best Lux performance I've ever watched. I think he just played like super. Kyria just played excellent. Kingin, so I'm going to give a super cold take here, but most people I'd say consider Kingin the World Finals MVP. He certainly was for me. Aatrox is another hero where I think when there's just a lot of skill expression where you can notice when people are doing a great job as him, and that was just like an amazing Aatrox performance. There's a reason this guy's just rank 1 Korea the entire year. And also just like his ability to be one of 2 people to be able to break even as Camille in the Camilla Aatrox matchup was just so detrimental to T1's whole strategy. Pioshik, look, I love Pioshik, but he's just like this total wild card player, and that's why we love him, right? But I think the fact that he drew Kindred bans the whole series, and I would consider basically decisive pathing victories every single game. And as I said before, I think 3 of the 5 games were just definitive jungle diffs in Pioshik's favor. I think that's more valuable than the missed smites. And TBH, as I showed, like, I don't know. You're not like, I should have brought it, but there's actually like an Xmithy tweet where he was telling people like, we're all underestimating empowered Varus Q damage, and like, yeah, like, I don't know, it's kind of like high ELO 101. Like, you're supposed to zone out Varus or something. It's very hard to outsmite, you know? I don't know. Overall, I'm very happy for Piosik. Zika, probably like the MVP of Worlds. He just an amazing player, just an amazing job all around. Super impressive performance. It's so funny because some people were like, yeah, this dude's like sort of like an Azir one trick. Some people are like, yeah, he's like a melee Akali Sylas. He's like a melee player like Akali Sylas. And like, I'm sort of like thinking like, all right, so like this guy's like really like dangerous on Akali, Sylas, and Azir. It's like, I think that just means you're amazing at the game. Right? So really, really impressed by Zika. Like he just killed it. Deft. I did not like the way Deft played this final series, even though he was supposed to be the protagonist. He had moments where he carried game 2. He decided the game with his Varus ult, carried by landing it on Faker. This game 5, the fact that he was able to come back and be a total menace late game as Caitlyn, even though his build is suspicious as hell, that was like that was like huge. I think he basically just struggled in lane, but was good otherwise, and he still had really good mechanics. And Barrow played one hell of a questionable series, but I think we've seen that his comms were super helpful. And, you know, for the most part, he's being proactive, even if he was making a lot of misplays. But yeah, hope everyone enjoyed watching. This was like one of the coolest World Finals. This was like the coolest World Finals ever. I thought the drafts were a blast, and I hope you like this draft analysis. I'll see you guys later.